Killing, Stalking, Out of Control / Never Understand, and Blood Bank. More on Korean BL Webcomics here in a second on Queer Fudanshi. Hi, welcome to Queer Fudanshi, where I share LGBTQ and BL media through news, reviews, and good conversation. My name is Devin Jackson Randall, and today is Monday, which means it's time for a random talk, where I pick a random conversation to have with you guys, or I pick from the questions, recommendations, suggestions that you guys leave me in the comments below. And today, we're going to be talking about Korean BL Webcomics. This is a kind of genre that is just becoming more popular in the Western world. A lot of Western BL Fujoshi and Fudanshi are really discovering Korean BL webcomics in the past year or two, and now I have a bunch that I would like to recommend to you guys. Now keep in mind that most of them, links in the description of course, to where you can read each and every one, but most of them come from the Leeson site. Because of that, you had to pay to view a lot of them. Now, of course, you could go find them on your favorite scanlation site, but keep in mind that these comics are made by real people who need to make a living doing what they do. So even if you do find it on your favorite scanlation site later, at least come back to the pay-per-view site and pay for a comic or two every now and then just to support the artists, okay? First we have Heaven or Hell Roman Company by Mum. The story goes that God has decided, you know what, human beings, they're good. They've advanced enough that I don't need to focus on them, right? And so he decides to focus on the children of his children, the creations, the stories, the so on and so forth. Demons and angels take care of these different fictional characters in their everyday lives. And in that company lives Rum and Ginger. They're the main characters. Now, Ginger has been in love with his best friend Rum for years, but has never admitted to it. He's been afraid of what will happen if he actually confesses and gets rejected. And so the story really follows Ginger being pushed along by everyone at the company, trying to push him into actually confessing to Rum. I feel like the idea of it is grander than the actual story that was presented. Like, I love the whole idea of the IP and the company and the demons and angels and everything. But the story as a whole, Ginger and Rum, it was light. It actually has already finished. There are 32 chapters in all, but the creator has hinted at maybe returning for a second season at some later point. We'll see. Next we have Raising a Bat by Jade. This is a story about vampires. You know, everybody's gonna have their twist on vampires. This one is about a normal high school boy who happens to have a blood deficiency, where actually he has, not exactly deficiency, he has too much blood. And so he has to donate it regularly, right? And one day he gets attacked by a vampire. And somehow it ends up that the two have this kind of mutual cohabitating beneficial relationship. One needs blood and one needs to get rid of blood, right? And they start a relationship through that. That of course then becomes romantic. Next we have Killing, Stalking by Kogi. This is a thriller, suspenseful kind of comic. It's not so much a romance, so there are kind of romantic tendencies in it, which is kind of creepy in itself. Essentially the story is about Boom, who is this very homely looking guy. He's very disheveled looking. And essentially he's been bullied all his life. One day he gets saved from his bullies by this guy, and he then becomes obsessed to the point that he starts stalking the guy. And then one day he even goes to the guy, whose name is Sungwoo by the way, house. He goes into Sungwoo's house, and then he finds out that Sungwoo is a murderer. He is a psycho killer, like full-on psycho killer. And then he ends up getting trapped in the house. And it's this really twisted, like psycho killer thriller relationship of this murderer who's really trying to corrupt his prisoner, right? This is not for the faint of heart. It's not safe for work for different reasons, being that it is about murder. It is a thriller, which I'm not into horror at all. I'm a total wuss, but I find this story interesting and compelling. Maybe it's just because it's a comic, so it's not as like jarring to me. It's not as realistic, but there is creepy stuff that happens. So if you're not into that, heads up. If you are, go read it. Next we have The Baker on the First Floor, which is a romance by Gyaka. This is the romance story between a comic artist and a baker who lives on the first floor. The baker just moves into the neighborhood, the apartment building, and he starts a relationship immediately with this comic artist. The comic artist is like you're into me, you're really hot, I don't understand this. In addition to that, he also has a past history, a very upsetting and traumatic romance that happened in his college years. The story really focuses on the introduction of this new couple and then goes into the past of this comic artist. That's where it is so far. I think it's interesting, but it isn't much yet. Next we have Loverboy. This is a relationship between a painter and a student. Essentially, this story is about these two people who were childhood best friends. One who was maybe 6 to 8 or so years younger than the other person, and they've known each other forever. The younger person has loved this other guy for years, and the older guy has always just thought nothing of it really. But now that the younger person is in college, they re-meet and sparks fly. It's really the story of a passionate, loving person who kind of breaks down or melts the ice of somebody who's really kind of put up walls. Next we have Window Beyond Window by Lee Aru, which is another childhood best friend story, but this time the two childhood best friends are at the same age. The two best friends, Shin Ji-nu and Yubin, have been in love with each other for all their lives but have never talked to each other about it. Specifically, Yubin has really been obsessed with his best friend, but has never really shown it. And then of course Shin Ji-nu has known this all his life and has felt the same way, but he's waiting for the other person to confess first. And then to top it all off, through convoluted storytelling, the two end up as sex buddies. So it's really a story about these two guys who won't talk to each other but are really into each other. Part of me really is infuriated by that, but part of me is like so interested. So go check it out and see what you think. Next we have Fools by Young Ha. This is a story about upperclassman Eun-gi and underclassman Jung-woo. Specifically, this is about the very mature upperclassman who everyone want to get close to but they feel intimidated by, and then there's the underclassman who is so pretty that everyone kind of teases him for it, right? And the two start this journey of falling in love, and really it's a very sweet story of just college romance, of very slow-paced but nicely paced romance, and I really like it. Go check it out. Next we have Blood Bank by Silk, which is another vampire story, the last one in this list, I promise. And this is the story about the upper crust of the vampires and the lower crust of the humans. And they have this kind of cohabitating relationship that doesn't really work out for the humans, but the upper crust vampires are the ones who kind of rule the land, and the humans have to live in slums and in poor conditions in servitude to the humans. The story specifically focuses on two people, one who is a human and works at a blood bank, and Shell, who is a vampire overlord and is the owner of that blood bank. The two start a sexual relationship where one is kind of confused because Shell, this overpowering vampire, wants to be the bottom in a BDSM relationship. And it starts off very sexual in that, but then the story evolves into this political story about the war between humans and vampires, and then it also becomes a loving romance between the two characters as well. This is a good comic that was very sexual in its start, but then it became very narrative and then very romantic at the same time, and I liked it in the later half. Next we have A Man Like You by Wage, which is about childhood best friends again. You can see all the cliches popping up here. The story is about these two childhood best friends who were very close and loving, but one of them disappears later, and then they meet later again in college. And this time, however, they both become two very different people. Jinha was a used-to-be comic artist who gave up his dream because his father forced him to. And Go Shiwan is a used-to-be sickly, kind boy who's become this mature, handsome man who's also got a terrible personality. And the two fight, but then they end up starting to have dreams where they meet and talk to each other. And they kind of unravel what happened, why their relationship went sour, and they try to figure out where to go from there. It's a story of missed opportunities and failed friendship that kind of gets annoying at some points, but is interesting enough to check out. Go see if you like it. Lastly, we have Out of Control or Never Understand by Bong. Keep in mind that I haven't actually read all of this comic like all the others. This is one that is the most popular that I never gave a second thought for some reason. And I've only now read up to chapter 28 to talk to you guys about it, just for a little bit. Essentially, this story is about a boy, Jabin, who is considered ugly. Everyone thinks he's ugly, even he thinks he's ugly. And he tries to get into the student council and almost misses the opportunity because of the fact that he is an attractive young man. And he ends up getting a sort of rivalry with the vice president of the student council, who is very mean to him and has some kind of bias towards ugly people. I haven't figured out what that's about yet, but once again, I'm only at 28 of 85 chapters so far. This is kind of typical and cliche of a story of this hard-working individual who ends up somehow in a relationship with this mean-spirited, good-looking guy, right? That said, what I like about the story so far is that, yes, it is cliche at the beginning, but around the 27th chapter, the story starts to change. And have any of you ever seen the Hanayori Dango live action, the Japanese one? I've seen the Japanese one and part of the Korean one. I haven't seen any of the other ones, or the comic it's based off of. But anyway, that's the story, once again, of a hardworking person who ends up in a relationship with a mean pretty boy, right? But what I liked about that story was that the mean pretty boy was the one to fall in love first. And the same thing happens in this comic. And it really becomes you have to make up for your past mistakes. You have to make up for the mean things you've done storyline, which I think is redeeming for a overplayed story. And that is it for this talk about Korean BL webcomics. Let me know what you guys think. Have you read any of these comics before? If so, let me know down in the comments below. Let's talk about them. Just put like a spoiler tag and then leave a couple spaces just to be safe. And as always, if you guys like this video, make sure to like it, share it with your friends, and to subscribe if you haven't already. Queer Fudanshi tries to share LGBTQ and BL media through news, reviews, and good conversation. So let's get talking. Bye. But it's just now getting there after, I don't know, 40 or so chapters, let me check. 27 actually.